You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.
We're live. Welcome, everybody. It is going to be a fascinating show today. We've got a fair amount of news. We have just announced, actually, press releases just went out earlier today from CCP Games about what they are calling the Invasion expansion, focusing on the Triglavians. And in terms of internet spaceship news within Tranquility, we have Villy here from Legacy Coalition, Test Alliance, and Aerith as well from Goonswarm to discuss CSM things, high-sec, Keepstar-related treaties involving trade, and there's just, we're not going to have nearly as much drama as last week. We're not really having any wild or crazy controversies unless Villy and I decide to get into it just to entertain the masses. But
we almost did. So I invited Vince Draken to come on, but he said all of his essays
was never going to come on.
Well, he's come on before. He has been here before. But he told me that he had a fleet FC, which I haven't seen him start a fleet up yet, so I think he was messing with me.
But, a couple of shout-outs here. We have Big Red Bear for 3 months. We've got Silverius. We've got, for 10 minutes, 10 months, Mara Sky, Mapster Tacticus, Sally Salmon. Thank you guys very much for your resubs. I've decided, one of the things I was talking about with LifeShifter, who handles streaming for INN the other day, is that we pretty much have always forgotten to ask for tips or donations or anything like that when it comes to the Meta Show. So essentially, if people throw money at the screen, if you guys do decide to do that, anything that goes to me, I will waste on scotch. I will just buy Oban 14 with it and drink it. And because I'm not Dirk, I will not drink it on TV.
Crazy alcoholic.
I'm not going to do it on live stream, but if I should remind people that you can throw money at the screen, and I will waste it on expensive booze. I don't know what Boat's going to do with it, but he can do.
I too will. Well, I wasted on wine because I like wine, so I've gotten into wine over the last few years.
Wow, I'm a little surprised.
Usually when I want a wine, I'll contact the friends of mine who have more money than I'll ever have and be like, "What wine do you guys drink?" And then they tell me the cheap but good stuff, and I get into that. So there's a really good one I have now called Apothic Red. It's about $10, and it's really good.
My ex-wife used to love that shit. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, so it's really good, and plus I like to cook, so having wine around for cooking is really helpful. I like to cook pretty much every weekend, so major meals. So back to the stuff. Some people are already saying, "Boat, you sound better." That's right. So, in case you forgot, last week I've been working with a guy who does professional podcasting, IRL, and he helped set up Adobe Audition for me and get me all set up with that. So. It actually sounds way better. The problem is my mouth's a little slower than the voice coming out, but that's almost unnoticeable. So yeah.
All right. So spaceship news. We've had a bunch more subs also here. We'll try to do one more round of shots.
So let's
talk. Sea Shuffle, Hawk GB1, Bard Ghost, Aisu, Augusta 99, Hildifer, Seabass Unique. Cinco de Mayo weekend. Also the Meta Show. Yes. Thank you all very much. And do you want to take us into our top story, Bo?
Yeah. But first, 1 second. I know we got a top story, but we got something new coming, and it's probably going to be in our donation button. But I want to give a shout out to Haiwanto. He made this recently, and so I want you guys to see. So anytime someone does something that I'm just going to be frustrated with, this is what I'm going to press.
It is extremely strange to see yourself getting turned into a meme or whatever. There's been a couple of those. I remember at the end of that IGN Most Ruthless Tyrant in Gaming hit piece video, which actually just made me seem like a super cool Bond villain. Like at the end of it, they have me in a suit, just like turning and staring at the camera or whatever, because they asked me to do that in that interview, and that made a pretty good GIF.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna get rid of the little name tag and make that do the pop up whenever someone donates.
That's awesome.
All right, so tough story today. I was kind of hoping to mess with a few of you when I changed the title to Invasion, because the Fireside today, Mittens always jokes about war, not war, coming to Eve. But there is an expansion / patch / I don't know what you want to call it, coming to Eve. It just got announced today. May 28th, Invasion is coming. I honestly have no clue. I read through this as quick as I could, but
is there actually a website that we can link people on this?
There's the link right there. There's the article. I linked
it. Yeah, I mean, so a couple of different things we can take away from this. They're having some new Triglavian related ships. You know what? Actually, I forget. We're going to be talking about the CSM later on. Aerith is a representative from the CSM. Aerith, could you, for our viewers, please summarize what's actually happening in this upcoming expansion, and sort of so we don't have to read between the lines of the press?
Well, I'll tell you what is not NDA, like what's already been kind of figured out by the public of what they've released. So, CCP's definitely asked us not to comment too much on this one. It's somewhat of a departure from their previous, the way they kind of roll things out, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, there's, the new Trig. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of the new Trig kind of like shipyard mothership thing being built, but there's been on Reddit that people have tracked down. I think there's a series of 3 of them now. And then, they've kind of teased in the article in the release that this is going to be some sort of forthcoming invasion. And, a la, like, it makes me think, and this is, I'm not using CSM knowledge here, it makes me think a la Incursions, except maybe what Incursions could have been is what I hope it ends up being, but we'll see. I don't know the full extent of what CCP wants to do here, just what they've released. But at the end of the day, more kind of PvE style stuff coming into Eve, if it's anything like Abyssal, I think will be a welcome, thing. Because a lot of shit died when Abyssal come in. I think people forget that.
Yeah. So some notes here, and we'll talk about each little bit. Some big ones coming, of course, are that I liked here is they're gonna round off balance changes by improvements to Tech 2 ammunition, which will allow faction storyline and officer weapons to use that. That is something that a lot of people have been wanting for a very long time, because for those that don't know, things like Spike for railguns, high damage close range torpedoes for missiles, and then for things like artillery using I forget the really long artillery thing. You can't use those on faction guns. And faction guns are just better. They fire faster. They do more damage. Same thing with officer guns. So you couldn't really scale up because you didn't have access to the close and long range ammos for all the best guns. So everyone just used T2 and then blinked out everything else. So now you're going to start seeing potentially faction guns on people's like combat ships and more blingy ships just because they have access to the ammos. That's pretty cool.
Well, one of the things about this is, I was reading over some of the notes on the expansion earlier. My first reaction was basically, ew, does this even really count as an expansion and stuff like that? Kind of negative stuff. But the more that I'm thinking about it, one of the things that I've always advocated for on the CSM and thereafter as sort of a talking head is better PvE experiences, right? Like Eve's PvP is fantastic. You can get it nowhere else. But for me, I have for my PvP aims, I play Eve, right? I'm not doing it directly, but the meta game is all competitive, human versus human stuff. And then for PvE, I play Warframe, right? Like I go play a completely different game. And Eve's PvE experience has never really had the kind of visceral satisfaction that the PvE in like World of Warcraft had, or things like Warframe, etc. So I think it's probably healthier for the game long term, assuming it's good. We don't know until we actually see it. But having more of an emphasis on a fun and fulfilling PvE experience is something that this game is very lacking in. So I hope it works out. I remember when Incursions first came out, it was like a really cool bonding thing before it became very old. But yeah.
A lot of people, though, have said that the reason the Eve PvE is a little more, I guess, not fulfilling as like some of the other ones is because you risk your ship every time you do PvE, especially with the new Abyssal. Aerith like this because of lots of explosions. It blew up the PvE ships. Whereas in games like WoW, you didn't really lose anything. long term, right? Like you would just do the dungeon again.
I think it's less about loss, and I think it's more about just like the feedback, right? Like the
Right.
actual sort of the visceral satisfaction, right? Like one of the things about like
Like, hey,
that
I did
made
this.
yeah, like well, did you like going from a game like EverQuest to a game like World of Warcraft, right? Like they didn't really change the formula of how MMOs worked, right? But what Blizzard did is they really worked on the polish there, such that even if you're like a level 1 dude and you're casting maybe for a spell or you're hitting an orc with a sword or something, like I don't know. I'm sure that there's a term of art to describe this in terms of game design, but like the physical experience of pressing the button and then your character does something cool, and then you go, "Man, that was cool. I'm glad that I did that." One of the challenges with the Eve PVE, of course, is you press F1, lasers happen. There's really no feel of holy crap,
Yeah.
space lasers, explosions. There's no oomph, right? That makes you go,
I
I want to keep pressing this button.
That and the rarity of a lot of PvE style games. When I think of PvE style games, I think of games like Diablo and stuff. You want to be that guy that was able to do it, where no one else is able to do it yet. To be that guy that climbed the mountain first. Someone points out in chat here, though, this is something we were getting ready to get into in just a moment, and this is kind of a big deal.
We're losing boat here.
Sorry. So one of the things that someone points out in chat is that these T2 mats that are going to drop from this incursion will be all of the stuff you need for the T2 Triglavian, which could make the price of those insanely high, unless they make it accessible to even the lowest of people, right? Because as we learned with the T3s were really expensive early on and took a pretty good amount of time before people could start using them in massive fleets. Only the real rich could really do that.
Yeah,
so this is interesting. I like
we'll
this.
Just sort of have to see what happened.
Yeah, so more things that were announced here to kind of keep the conversation going. I want to get maybe Villian talk about this too. Is the Triglavian ship that everyone's been seeing, the RP aspect that continues to build. Here's a video of it entering stage, I think 3 or level 3 of its build. So if you like RP, there's that. I'm not an RP person, so yeah, enjoy. But one thing that's pretty interesting, and I'm curious about this, and we don't know where this is going because nobody can talk about it. It's in the know, but we did see this on Sissy, is Stargate animations have changed. They show 2 animations here. One is which the Stargate deactivates and starts flashing red, kind of like it's shut down and it's unusable. If you remember the Eve video, something skies, they did where like the
Clear skies,
where like they shut the gate down and nobody could get into that dead end system. This is what it reminded me of. If that's true, oh boy, that's going to be amazing. And then they also show it reactivating where it like starts back up and you see people jumping through it again. So this could be something they're looking to add. Maybe if too many people try to jump through a gate at once, or too big of a ship tries to jump through a gate like hundreds and hundreds of Titans, that it just shuts down for a short time. Who knows? This is speculation, obviously. This is on the test server, but nothing was said. They just shared it.
I am highly curious as if this is another attempt by CCP to limit lag mechanics by saying all of a sudden you can't activate gates now without considering any of the consequences.
Right, like
that would be
tie-dye.
Kind of funny. Like, oh hey, like there's a big battle happening over here, and now nobody in the rest of the galaxy can get to it. So stop.
Right, because you get tie-dye.
I don't think they do that, but that would be
20
funny.
systems away.
That's
because
exactly how it used to work, right? Because there used to be a system for a couple of years where you couldn't get into a system after it hit like, what was it, 3,200 or something?
Right, yeah, so many people, the system would just be inaccessible.
Yeah.
Crowd control, yeah. But this is big is the way CCP maps their nodes. It's like a modern day gerrymandering. You could be in the middle of Amist and the fight's going on in Venal, and all of a sudden you get tie-dye. So like, imagine if a jump gate gets deactivated in the middle of fucking Amist, there ain't no fight for miles. All of a sudden you can't use your gate. Whew, that could be interesting.
We're just doing the total raw speculation thing here, just to sort of sum things up and move on past the invasion things and sort of get into nullsec news and stuff like that. Any like Aerith, what's your, from just an opinion perspective, from what you've seen so far? You don't have to tell us anything about anything NDA, but is this going to be a cool expansion? Should we be excited? We haven't really heard much hype from CCP. I'm surprised to see this press release today. the nullsec demographic, people watching the show, what is your first impression based on what you know?
I think it's going to be something interesting. I think it's going to be something that Null has its fingers in a little, if you will, at some point, just because you can't have ships like this, as good as they look like they're going to be, and not want to use them as Null. Like, the great limiter so far in the Trig line has been scarcity, right? There's some demand, but you really don't want to start throwing these things around if they're, 1.5, 2 billion fit. You want it somewhere under a billion or a billion or less for most doctrines. And that's when things start getting really interesting. So I think we'll like it. I think we'll probably utilize some of the materials coming from it. It'll just be a while.
Yeah, before we move on here, real quick, one of the comments is they're really bringing out those new ships, and the one that looks really good is the one that gets 2 Triglavian guns. So you could be like shooting a structure and then shoot at the enemy that you're fighting, or you could be shooting their Logi and their main target. So that leads to new possibilities of something that haven't been done with Triglavian. So, but moving on real quick, this is another bit of the top story because it also goes along with the announcement for this expansion. They announced this week that the CSM candidacy is open. They also released a timeline as to how they're going to announce which candidates are in the running and which candidates have won. So I want to start this off by linking Aerith's post to his announcement of the CSM. If you didn't read this when it was posted, it's so good. And you got to go in and read the comments. And Aerith, you're running, but I heard that someone else in this chat might be running. Is that true?
I believe it is.
Would you care to share?
Aren't you going to speak for yourself, Billy?
Vote for Billy!
It's I didn't know that we were gonna do a Joe Biden moment here. I don't know whether.
No, obviously yes. I have.
Announced.
I am a candidate for the Council of Stellar Management, whatever number we're on now. Obviously, I'm
60.
Rah, improve things, good stuff, etc. I haven't done the work yet to actually put together like a reasonable platform, so I'm not going to pretend I have.
So, spoiler alert: platforms don't mean shit. They don't mean anything.
Really, I didn't know that.
Hey, man!
Billy,
I don't know about
Billy
you,
has
but
been a veteran of a number of CSM campaigns over the years, even from his time in Goonswarm. So you got to see sort of how the sausages are made.
Well, to be fair, most people don't know. I was actually, like the second alternate CSM too. So.
Really, I didn't
know that. You didn't wait. What was you didn't get on?
No, I was like in like some random like low-sec like roamer corp at the time, so I had like 10 people to vote for me, but I still like put together a platform and did a lot of the work. So that was back when like non-null block candidates actually got on from time to time.
Oh,
before CSM 5, yeah. If you're saying it for CSM 2, yeah, that was before the Jade Constantine days.
Yes. See, my thing about voting is I just like having that individual choice to vote as the state tells me. We.
Yeah.
I feel like
who's your backup, Billy? Like in case it all goes wrong, creature style. Who's your backup?
Crickets.
You don't have one. Oh my god, this is amateur hour.
Oh,
who's your backup, Aerith?
Doesn't have to be that complicated. As usual, like the way that the CSM stuff works in nullsec is each of the blocks. So this will actually be a natural segue into something we're going to be talking about soon that also involves us and Billy.
Yes.
But talking about like how the sausages are made. So for people who are unaware of the real process, the nullsec blocks will usually communicate with one another. There will usually be some deals of, we'll put your candidate on this ranking on our ballot if you put, and vice versa. So people are like trading positions on ballots, and then everybody votes in a block. So this is why, like, historically, you've seen some strange things, like, back when he was on CO2, the judge still being on the Imperium's ballot or things like that. So, as usual, if you are, so Billy, I assume we'll talk to our diplomats and we'll figure out how we're doing that shit for a legacy. And I know Dunk Dinkle is, I really don't keep track of Brave, or I assume Dunk Dinkle is still in Brave. Like, are they part of Legacy these days? Where are they? Where is Dunk Dinkle? Is he in a block?
I think Billy died.
I think
no, sorry. Some idiot paladin's currently like tackling one of my Sino Hicks. So I'm like, I need 5 supers to log in to come kill this random paladin. Like literally, it's a paladin, a stiletto, tackling my Sanohic. So I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I'm gonna kill him.
Gotcha. So if Dunk is also in Legacy, so we're going to Villian Dunk from Legacy, and then
Elo Knight from Fraternity's 20,000 Chinese voters. I'm pretty sure we'll have someone from Horde try, because they've got a lot of like 5 guys to vote.
Well, we think we know like 7 already. I mean, if you play this out, it's going to be,
yeah, please.
Let's say myself, Merc, and if say Nom gets on. Okay, then you got Dunk, then you got Billy if he's not DQ'd.
you have yeah, I've met Dunk a couple times at FanFest and various other events, and he's super chill. Like, dude gave me a brave beer open.
Yeah, he does give cool stuff. But here's the question: does Sword or Killer Bee get back on? Or are they even running?
Yeah, I think KB for NC was good for them, and Sword. So now we're at 8. If you factor in everybody we know that is running, that is announced or said they're running, and that have the blocks, we're at 8. So there's only 2 spots up for grabs right now, probably.
And then the other 2 would be, well, possibly Elo.
The Wormholers Unite. I don't know if Elo actually has the kind of like block support. Like, he's a niche candidate. Even
he's getting the fraternity vote.
Well, they say that, but we don't actually know because we haven't seen them deliver a block in election. Like, people say they're going to support whatever, but the amount of work behind the scenes that goes into essentially a political campaign, right? Like, basically a digital equivalent of knocking on doors, finding voting blocks, doing deals behind the scenes, like the stuff that actually gets people to fucking vote. There's a ton of stuff that goes into that. So, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe Elo has fraternity behind them, but what does that actually mean? Can they deliver the votes?
Haiwanto would make a good CSM because you got to be like diplomatic when you talk to CCP, and calling them giant sacks of shit wouldn't really work, wouldn't get things done. And Haiwanto would probably do that. So
I think there's a strong incentive. I mean, one of the biggest reasons why the Burst Gruball stuff was so shitty for the player base and for CCP is that the more involved you are in the touch points of the game, it seems like the more risk you are at randomly getting banned unfairly over bullshit, right? Like, so, somebody who operates more in the metagame and doesn't touch the client very often is safer. This is what we learned from the Brisk and, Dark Shines and Pando getting whacked as part of just a random ass fuck up. The closer that like real FCs get to the CSM, CCP has made that more dangerous, which I think is bad for the game, right? We want to have people who are heavily involved in fleets on the line regularly advising CCP. But anyway, whatever.
Well, I like to point this out to people. I also was permabanned by CCP at one point and had it rolled back. So this isn't like a one and done. A nominate has been banned by CCP and had it rolled back. So this is a very common thing. Jintan permabanned and rolled back, or I think regular banned. So
yeah. We talked about that. We're one of the only shows that mention those kind of things here because we do our investigative work. But this is a great opportunity to segue into deals and how to make deals. And I want to commend our wonderful deal making team here in on the stream as we go into the nullsec power. On this segment of the art of the deal, sorry, I had to do it. The high-sec wars are over. And I say high-sec wars because we've been talking about them for a while now. But they've ended, and they ended very quietly. There was one little Reddit post with 100 points, and it was hidden and put away. But this is a big deal, and it's a big deal for what it doesn't include, more so than what it does include. So here we go. Tescoon's Horde, I'll get a cut of the high-sec profits. Horde has been either unwillingly or willingly forced to share its cut with NC Dot. Oh, sorry, it's
Horde has been willingly or unwillingly
been forced to share its bits with the NC Dot and Vince. No more fighting over high-sec, and the Keepstar will stay where it is because I like that Keepstar.
I don't know anything about Horde being forced by NC to do anything.
I had like 8 PMs this week going, Bodhi, you got to talk about this. I heard that Gobbins had to bend the knee to Vince. So I don't know if that's real or not, but that's just what I'm getting told.
That would be actually. Can you send me that like on Jabber? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll find it. Yeah.
Anywho, so
anyway, moving forward.
Why don't we introduce Billy, who was
go ahead.
the architect of this thing, and Billy made the step of announcing it in public. Why don't you tell us about talk about what the deal is and what the background is that led into the necessity or the idea to make such a deal?
Well, basically, we're in a situation where the perimeter markets are extremely close to our enemies, and they're pretty far from us. So obviously, when we took the perimeter market and took control of that area, it was a pretty big win. Our enemy was distracted. They were weak. They were broken. They were bent. But after a little bit of time, they recover, and all of a sudden, we're 72 jumps away, and they're 12 jumps away. So anytime we want to respond, it takes them 10 minutes. It takes us a jump clone, which we get one of a day. So after a little while, obviously, it fails to be an effective way to manage the area. And even though we were like 99.99% confident they would never be able to kill the Keepstar, there was definitely the reality that they would eventually be able to reinforce it into a second timer. And certainly that is a very real possibility with both the Tatar and the Sotios on grid. And as soon as you hit a second reinforce on that kind of a structure, you lose all of the market trust, you lose the market itself, people start pulling all their orders, and you're back to square one, basically. So, we chose to make a deal. We cut in both yourselves, and because realistically we can't hold the market without you guys, and Horde because they're the main aggressors. They're the people that can kind of control the offensive action against us. And that was kind of the thing. And it creates as much as, it is, we're cutting a deal because, we have other priorities to deal with, other things to do, other things we want to do. There's definitely a situation where we're just trying to stop, or we're trying to create a high-sec environment that's actually good for the game. I listened to like an hour-long talk with one of the high-sec guys who actually explained to me that like when you're at 0.0 tax or 0.1 tax, the level in which it affects the game is actually pretty significant because it allows for massive manipulation of the Plex market. So it actually changes that. And yeah, overall we're doing just fine. And
awesome.
it's a good deal in the end. Everybody gets a little bit, everybody makes more money, etc.
There's a few kind of funny things about this. I never thought I would give a shout out to Gevlin Goblin, right? But this deal is sort of a classic nullsec autocrat deal, just in the same way as Botlord or an OTEC. Where everybody in sort of the nullsec leadership decides, this particular aspect of gameplay sucks, or it's just better for all of us to handle things in a certain way. And nobody was particularly enjoying the shit show in these ops and high sec one way or the other. So it's easier for everyone to just slice the pie up and then murder each other in other avenues. But one of the things about this, as it relates to Gevlin Goblin, is Villy, is it all right if I tell the story about?
Oh yeah, of course.
So Villy and I are talking, and we're hashing out some of the aspects of the deal. And Villy is really the architect of this baby because he was also, I assume, talking to Gobbins. I wasn't talking to Gobbins.
Yeah, I did both sides of the negotiations in two different chats.
Credit to this one goes to Villy. So he links me this blog post from Gevlin Goblin from like 3 or 4 years ago, talking about what at the time I remember being some sort of ridiculous conspiracy theory, because at the time we had no idea how important brokers' fees were for like an economic impact. And Gevlin Goblin has this blog where he's talking about how when citadels are implemented, the nullsec powers are going to establish like a trade keepstar for tax purposes, and then they will do a botlord or OTEC style deal to share the revenue across all of nullsec, and then high fives all around. And I was like, wow, I guess the dude called it. He then goes on to
he predicted it would be the quote unquote Palatine Keepstar or whatever, but like
oh, did he see it was going to be the Palatine? Yeah. That's obviously,
but it's almost like what's it, Nostradamus, where it's like the things look like it's all serious, awesome, and then you realize the guy's nuts. Gavin Goblin was a little nuts.
This is a really good question here from Chillback Owner, which was what for the uninitiated, what does this deal actually mean for the average player? And I don't know, Vil, if you want to take this, or Aerith, if you want to take it from an economic perspective.
I'll give it to you.
You're going to pay more, but it'll be safer.
Billy, what do you got?
Well, it's pretty much the same, right? You have a safe and secure market, jump from JITA at 0.3%, so 1/10 of what JITA fees are. It is now protected by arguably the three major powers in terms of blocks in EVE between PanFam, Legacy, Imperium. So nobody is taking it. So effectively, you can literally have JITA in perimeter with 1/10 the tax, and there's basically zero risk now, because all the parties are, on the same page. Everybody's interested in just having a nice, well-working market. Free flowing. I don't know. Insert John Locke or whatever market philosophy stuff in there. But everybody wins, I guess you could say.
I like the way that this guy puts it. It's a Gita black market guarded by the mob. For things like Plex transactions, things that cost a lot of money that you have to buy once a month, it's nice to not have to pay that big old tax.
That's a pretty good metaphor there. I like that there. The black market guarded by the mob, but it's true though. I mean, it's cheaper to, one of the things that's interesting about this deal is that there's some discussion in chat about the idea that like one group might be able to overwhelm the others. What's unique about it is you have these sort of the
All right.
tactical situations of where does it. You can go, Philly, if you want.
No. I'm trying to tell some supers to go back to stations.
Okay, so I'll keep ranting. So the what's interesting about this is perimeter is very close to Horde's territory, right? Like, so it's very easy for Horde to project power towards that. However, their forces are not as strong as Legacies or the Imperiums. So it's not a matter of like all of these nullsec powers meeting together and having a test of will and wits as on essentially the same level, right? So like the Imperium is way further out, but we have a rather strong military. Horde is very close to this. So it's interesting because essentially we have, as autocrats, been able to sort of collectively titrate everybody's cut on this thing based upon what they could hypothetically bring to the table, given the circumstances if we were trying to murder each other. And then instead, we get to laugh all the way to the bank. The citizenry of EVE gets to have cheaper taxes. And it's unfortunately some sort of a hellish metaphor for modern post-industrial international capitalism. But that's EVE.
But here's the big thing.
It's actually funny. One of you guys in chat mentioned that, you can still get bumped and killed or whatever on the keeps. But the reality is you actually kind of can't, because you don't get scanned as you undock. So it's a lot safer in terms of ganking. And you're not, it's just a lot safer because of the way tether mechanics work.
I have an econ question here, actually. So this is sort of the next iteration from what does it mean to the line members, right? Because if people, or just not people who aren't even line members, people who are just like random players in HiSec, you can buy goods from these citadels, because it's not just the Keystar. There's a few other ones that are part of this deal. You can buy these goods and not pay the kind of market transaction tax that you would at JITA 404. Okay, that's what it means to the dude on the bottom line. Aerith, could you maybe talk about the effects on supply and production and market effects of essentially this nullsec deal creating a space where broker fees and these standing taxes basically just don't really apply anymore?
Well, you see the biggest ramifications in like injectors and Plex, things that are somewhat ethereal where you can use them remotely and gain their benefit to where you don't have to transport them. So it will dominate those just as like it has been, and there would be no way to really compete against it in those markets. And then the things then it kind of goes down the M3 chain, right? Things that are high value to their M3 size could slowly move over. The downside is it's going to be very difficult.
Could you just, when you say M3 chain, a lot of people, I mean, you're talking about the size of various objects, but what do you mean by the M3 chain?
Okay, so basically you can think of the different markets in EVE broken up into how big they are for their IS value. So like some things, I'm going to use reactions just because that's on the brain of everybody right now. The very raw materials are very small for their size, for their M3 value. So they have a lot of value in a very small space. But as you go up that chain, they get progressively bigger to where it's more difficult to move. So the keep will benefit in the markets where the M3 is very low and the high vis value, because those things are easy to move in and out to the production areas, because you're not going to want to produce in perimeter a lot of goods. So you're not going to get enough margin producing there, the things that are in HiSec. But where this gets really interesting is if you project out in the meta, let's say 6 months, a year. Let's say we have a nice little war in nullsec, and after that war, we all sit down and decide, what do we want to do next collectively as the null powers? How about instead of another war in nullsec, we go into HiSec and we say, let's expand the program. Let's kill all the Satoyos, or let's kill all the any EC that is producing that isn't ours, and let's cartel all of the HiSec production if we wanted. Like, you could do that within a few jumps of JITA and monopolize that market. So that'll be interesting to see if Null decides, do we like this model? Do we make enough money from it? And let's all fund ourselves from HiSec by oppressing them. That would be fun.
And one question I have, and this is maybe even further than that, is this comes up from time to time when you see the metrics of the monthly economic report. The ISK sinks and ISK faucets, one of the ISK sinks that CCP has or uses is that 3%, right? Because that 3% goes to CCP and disappears. Making that 0.3%, what happens now? It doesn't go to CCP, it doesn't disappear. And 3% is a lot when you're talking trillions of ISK, right? In JITA every day. So what happens with that?
Well, it's 1/3%, but yeah. So lots of things will never leave JITA. They're just big, they're bulky, or you need the available space that you have for years. Like I'll use me, for example. I couldn't move most of my net worth because it is so large. It was something like, I don't even want to know, like 1,000 freighter loads or something ridiculous. So even if I contracted them, can you imagine the carpal tunnel trying to move? So there's probably a lot of people that applies to. But where the fees get really interesting is going to be in those items where I need raw goo, for example. We could say as Null Powers, let's put all our raw goo that we're going to sell in JITA, let's put it in the keep now. Well, previously, Goons, which is the largest producers of goo, would have never participated because that would have been ISK going to our competition. But now, if we're getting a slice of it and it's a cooperative venture, maybe we do export all our goo there and we could start moving parts of the market away from JITA. Remains to be seen. We got to see how the deal works out, but that's the kind of thing that could happen.
Right. So that means
it's very interesting. Like you could truly see, like there is a legitimate possibility in this where we could truly pull perimeter or JITA to perimeter. Like I
could see that actually. Yeah. I mean,
one of the things that is fascinating.
Right, maybe not. I mean, the natural sort of course of commerce, if a whole bunch of people decide that they want to do it and they outsource the task of moving the goods to hauling services and things, like, the JITA didn't used to be JITA. What we call now JITA at one point was ULI. So, these things can absolutely move. And one of the things that's fascinating about this from like a game-wide perspective is in many ways how routine the reaction was to Vili's announcement, right? When we first announced OTEC, when we first announced Botlord, like these big treaties between entities that were hostile, it was extraordinarily controversial. And what I think that we've seen now is kind of like the idea of international agreements in the real world, where you're like, okay,
people
like,
just accept it.
Yeah, like there's a League of Nations, there's a UN. This is just a thing that happens. We have an international order. We have an international Red Cross. It is fascinating that we've reached this sort of modern era in EVE, where the idea that, like, everybody in nullsec who hates each other is going to get together, sign a treaty, share a cut of some profits, high fives all around, no big deal.
It's all about the bucks, right? It's all about the Benjamins in this case. It's never about what's best for maybe even individual pilots. It's about how we're going to make the most money.
That.
Well, no, if money flows down, right? Like the reimbursements get better, you can have more money to
spend. Well, it's more fundamental than that. Like the bottom line is, as much as we may all hate each other in nullsec and go to war and everything, we still hate PySec pubbies more than each other. Like if I can take money from those people and like have a little, high five with all my little nullsec friends and we oppress them, and then on the weekends, we fight it out. Okay, like why wouldn't we do that? And what is HiSec going to do about it? Nothing.
It's sort of a colonialism, actually. If you think about it, you're seeing nullsec powers are colonizing HiSec and creating spheres of influence with militarily protected trading hubs. It's all very like just before the opium.
Okay, so Vince couldn't make the show today. He was supposed to come on. This is one of the questions I had for him. He replied in a PM. He says, we have no interest in what's going on in the perimeter. Godwin's consulted with us before the treaty, of course, but we were more interested in the fights rather than the money that comes out of it. So, okay.
Right.
Yeah,
they got left out.
Well, I think you're looking at a slow change in the guard in reality. NC Dot is still relevant in the North. Like they are probably the largest super cap force in the North. But it's not by the margin it used to be, and it's certainly not true in the subcap degree. And NC Dot just isn't as relevant as they used to be. Like,
Yeah.
I hate to be the one to kind of say that. Like, I'm not trying to say this in a mean way, but like, they're just not the like. Yes, they are
NC
still
and
the
PL
top
are
dog.
not. Yeah, they're not like they're not hegemons, right? They're not like truly like there are powers. I'd say that NC dot is still a great power, but it has. But people pay
Yeah.
attention. It's sort of like post decolonization, decolonialism, or whatever in England, right? Like the fall of the
Right.
British Empire. Like it's still everybody treats the British with respect. They've got nukes, things like that, but it's not like oops, you conquered the world and we have to pay attention to you.
Uh, yeah, actually, that's a really good analogy here because I remember Villy said this a couple months back after the X-47 thing, after uh, the fall of NC's might, because NC was, it can almost be seen like a pre-Cold War, like not pre-Cold War, during Cold War Russia, where they were viewed as so scary, and then when the USSR fell apart, it was like, wow, they really were just a paper tiger that just crumbled. And that's what where
I
NC's
don't
now
know if
is
I'd say
nobody.
they were a paper tiger though. Like they
Well,
were
okay,
quite formidable in that war. It's just they weren't the guy that got to be standing at the end.
right, but at the end of the day, like nobody looks at NC and goes, wow, they're really, really, really terrifying and we should be extremely careful. It's more of, yeah, they got a lot of supers and titans, but now we know we can beat them.
Well, I
For
think that
reals.
I think that that's a very Imperium oriented perspective. I mean, the fact is that NC Dot has the military power and the super capital force to go toe to toe with most entities in the game and crush them into dust. Right? Like if NC versus almost any other entity besides like the
Right.
Imperium, which is massive and ridiculous. And I think that if NC went after Legacy on their own, Legacy would crush them. But if you're not like the Imperium or Legacy, I think that NC is a very significant power and would just kick the ass. Like if we were talking shit about PL, it would be a different story. I think that PL has really of the NC and the PL. The life and the organization and the structure has really sort of been maintained in NC Dot, in no small part from the work that Lady Scarlet and her crew have done to maintain an economic base of power in the Galactic Northeast, which PL never really did the work of building up an economic source of
Oh, I'm
anything
dismantling
after
that.
its
Don't worry.
R64s. So I do think that NC is quite significant.
Yeah, but here's my thing though, right? Like when you look at it, I think it comes down. We may have said this for years. I've always said this in the Eve relationships. It's how a leader views other leaders, right? And I always think, and this is my opinion, that Vince looks down on everyone else as like beneath him. Whereas, as much as people might say jokes, I think Mittens has no problem talking to other leaders with like an equal footing, kind of like a UN, right? Like you'll walk into the room and everybody has an equal footing here. We'll all chat. Hey, yeah, the Imperium's giant and we'll crush you with our boot. But at the end of the day, we can see eye to eye. I don't think Vince has ever done that with anyone he's ever worked with. They always talk about that strain between Vince and other leaders whenever you hear about it from other leaders. So Sword Dragon's wanted to point this out very clearly a few times now, where it's just hard to work with guys like Vince or Headliner or even Gobbins, right? Like
well,
it just doesn't work out.
Headliner might be a dick to people in his fleets occasionally, but Headliner is perfectly fine to work with and
I've never
deals
worked
with. It really just comes down to who is reliable over the long term. That you could make a treaty with, right? Like Vince has broken a number of deals. We occasionally will still do deals with NC Dot anyway over time, but there's definitely a big chilling effect when it comes to that. I don't know. It's hard to speak to the personal dramas, but
Right.
I think that I think it's a good treaty. I think it's good for everybody in nullsec. I think it's good for the people in highsec, and it's just sort of a fascinating deal. And thank you, Villy, for putting it together.
Well, it's one of those situations where everybody wins, right? Everybody in the game wins. In theory, I wouldn't mind if some of the people lost, but you don't get everything in the world you want. But
I mean,
everybody that's not involved is a winner. In terms that they have all these production facilities, the only Tech 2 refinery in the area. This incredibly perfect market. You pay a tenth the tax, and obviously that tax goes to us versus CCP, because who likes giving CCP their money, right?
Right. Good point. Exactly. We had this. Go ahead. Sir.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Bo.
Well, this discussion actually came up yesterday on my show. It's like this guy was trying to justify being a renter with liking the renter lifestyle, and then This Keepstar reminds me of that. So for instead of paying CCP their cut, you give it to a bunch of humble workers who put in the effort to maintain balance and order in the universe.
Alrighty, so we are at the 45-minute mark, actually a couple minutes past that.
I hear that's Cool
And
Kids
we
Only
are
mode.
going into
Yeah.
Cool Kids Only mode, indeed.
And this
so if you are a subscriber, thank you for subscribing and helping fund my newly created Scotch fund for the multi-dollar media. And as we do Cool Kids Only mode, we like to take questions from the cool kids. If you guys have questions that you would like us to ask either ourselves or our guests, or if you just want to talk shit with each other, go nuts, have fun.
Since we are activating Cool Kids Only mode, I want to point out something, and I know a lot of you listeners are Imperium or in the individual corps, and we have over 400 some corps in the Imperium, and we also have Villy's guys that watch from Test, and they have a lot of corps. One thing that we're looking at doing here on the Meta Show, and we're exploring, is the idea of, if you ever watch CCP streams, sometimes they'll have like corporate advertisements from various corps where they do that. We're looking to do like ISK for corp advertisements, maybe. This is being looked at, so and turning that into a way to give giveaways for the show. So like you pay $1 billion ISK, you get to show a little 30-second clip at the beginning of the show about your corporate at the end, and then I'm going to take that ISK and turn it into more giveaways, because we haven't done real like actual ISK giveaways for like big ships and stuff in quite a while. We used to do them quite frequently, haven't done them in a long time, and I want to get back to maybe giving away a Nix once a show or something like that, something amazing. Hey, wow, more gifted subs. So that's being looked into. Who knows if that'll actually materialize, but I wanted to share that with everybody. So think about it. Yeah. More cool things for Meta Show people that watch, because I like giveaways and I like giving away stuff. So, but this is a great segue moment. And while you guys ask your questions, Villy, how's the war going in the South? Because this again is between you and Fraternity, and there's not much news. I tried to find a lot this week, and there wasn't any. So,
well, I don't know if you guys read my Alliance update that I just put out here.
No, I have not. If you want to link it, please.
Well, it's not in a place.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you
mean. It's on the test forums, which usually are leaked within like an hour somehow.
So,
I didn't see. I've been busy at work. Sorry.
You must have not included anything particularly controversial, because.
Yeah, so basically, like what I said is that like this war so far has been a total waste of fucking time. We're literally just like slamming our face into a brick wall. The combination of time zone tank and the new Sinojammer mechanics is so fucking insane. I cannot describe it. So unlike the previous system where if you had at least one level of advantage, so if you had super capital advantage but you didn't have capital and regular sub-capital advantage, then you would be in a situation where you could, make plays to get the jammer down and then do things.
Right.
But the problem is with the current mechanics, you have to kill 3 fucking Sinojammers per system with a fucking damage cap on every one of them for a whole constellation to have any chance at making progress and taking Soft through the constellation. It is literally insane the amount of work it is to take per
Chris said this last week. Yeah, this was brought up last week by Karen.
This is when was it time wise that they changed? And I know that they added the new types of Sinojammers. When did that change to go into effect?
Right after the last major war, like December.
Yeah.
Like 6 months ago, 5 months ago.
Right.
Yeah, because our guys have mostly been burning things in like the drone regions and stuff like that, where you don't really have like dug and defended people with. Using these Sinojammers, so that actually just hasn't really cropped up.
Yeah, but you're only really fighting renters, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying is that this is
subcap for subcap. Yeah,
I'm sort of hearing about this. So can you? So they're putting down like 3 Sinojammers. Walk us through why this is such miserable dog shit, please, in more detail.
So basically, normally to get into a constellation, you have to come in from like, let's say, one of 3 sides, right? And if your enemy is properly set up, especially with the new jump bridges, which allow you to move between the constellation like for free, they can effectively cover like large swaths of the area without any like it's hard for me to describe this all, because they can basically create a wall of Sinojammers. So you can't get into the system or into the constellation aside from a singular point. Right?
Yeah, starfish, yeah.
And then if you can get into the constellation, you have to spread your Atosis out through however many systems. And then you have, like you have to fight it with subs, obviously.
Yeah.
If you didn't, like, it's.
So you're saying
The
that
core problem is, like, even if I control the time zone before, the timer, I have to chew through an individual Sinojammer with.
Go ahead.
Just what other people are messaging me on Mumble for some.
So what you're saying here is that you've got to shoot through these Sinojammers, then start doing the solve game, and then if they start to put up new Sinojammers, because you could have 3 of these things in every single system, you have to then shoot through those Sinojammers again, which means you have to stop hacking, and it takes a hack that may have normally taken maybe an hour or 2. If you had dominance, it could stretch it to 8 or 9 hours, and then it become a time zone tank. I know you look at your face, but that's happened. Now imagine with these new structures, I guess it gets even worse, especially with the time zone tanking involved.
That sounds like some great iteration on Fozzie Sov. That's
right,
exactly
a career.
What we wanted to spend more time doing.
Career
Career
he was here last
super
week.
Burned out when we talked about that last week.
Right. He said that the problem is that you can only ask your pilots to stay up so late every night, and if you're doing this every night just to break one iHub a night, because
here's the real problem. So let's say, for example, and we did the math here. We're like, let's say we take 2 systems in a constellation, put in the work, whatever. We now have to defend that constellation, because they have, Sinojammer control of the entire constellation. We're now in a position where, like, to every time they reinforce those 2 systems, we got that little bit of progress we made. We now have to, fight that, Entosis battle under their Sinojammers, under their jump bridges, every time. So even if you could take something, it's next to impossible to hold. So
right.
It's
so what you're saying is it's kind of like World War I trenches thing. Yeah, like you're
it
would
be significantly worse. Like,
but
the thing is, like, if you have full super capital control, full sub capital control, and full sub capital control, or supers, regular, and subs, you can, like, it's moderately doable.
And it's so easy to turn this on and off, right? Like on a whim.
Yeah, like it takes 1 second to turn off and 5 minutes to turn it back on. I don't know who the fuck thought that. Like, I think I actually put a post up about when they were doing that. I'm like, this is a fucking terrible idea. And everybody that
you can blame the CSM. You can blame the CSM for this one, and it wasn't me. But I knew what was going to fucking happen when they asked for it, and I was like, "I'll go." Fuck it, yeah. Okay,
is this reflected in the minutes that have been
published? I think some of it is. Like, I think parts of it is, but you know how they, like, abbreviate the minutes where they kind of summarize, like, it's kind of in there, but it wasn't fucking good.
Okay, chat says we complained about this at Vegas, strictly CCP, and they seem to think it would work out great. This honestly feels like if you've got a giant freaking wall, and we talked about this last week with Career, the 4060p 77S wall. If you've got a wall, invading someone's space, if they are truly at their keyboard and able to defend it, is next to impossible at the moment. Would you say that, Billy? Like, if you're on equal terms, like, number-wise.
Well, we're at an advantage number-wise, but it's not a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 number advantage, which is literally what you need to make any progress right now in terms of, like, heavy solve.
So, like, I looked at some battle reports over the last couple of weeks and prepared for the show, and one of them we got here is over at Retaro. You guys are winning the fights, but it's not enough to just win the fight and then be able to continue on for 6 hours, because every hour, a whole new group shows up, and it just becomes, you make no progress. So you feel like you're fighting for nothing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. Like, it's just, like, to make meaningful progress would require us burning our members into the ground, right? And obviously, we're not going to do that. Like, what's the payoff isn't worth the effort at this point. So we're in this really unfortunate situation where we're in a war where we can't really, and obviously this goes the other way too, right? They can't make any real progress against us. U.S. time zone is just, they've got Elo to, like, run rings around and skirmish and stuff. And
Elo doesn't solve, so yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so, like, they get some kills or whatever, but they're not going to break anything any more than we are. So it's this just really boring game of, like, the most we do is spam each other with Raideroos and Astra Houses.
So, I mean, is this the sort of thing, would you say, where, like, there is a number of outgunning your foe, after which point this doesn't matter? Like, is it a kind of thing where a one-on-one defensive war where like both parties are roughly equal or whatever means that that nothing can happen on either side? Is it like you bring twice the forces and you crush fraternity, you bring 3 times the forces? Like, is it one of those things? Like, what
To
do
a
you think
degree,
it would
yeah.
take?
Like if you can put 2 times the numbers for any fight, then you should be okay. But the other part of the problem obviously becomes because of the new jump gates, we now have Horde, which is only like 5 jump
7
gates and
jumps.
like 8
Yeah.
regular jumps away. And Skill U, who is like 3 jump gates and like 9 regular jumps away. Like, and obviously you can usually relegate those normal jumps with just a simple
Titan Bridge, yeah.
Titan Bridge. So it's like some of these fleets that we're back to the old days of power projection where you can move a fleet halfway around the galaxy in like no time.
And this is because of the ACL change, right? Because ACLs, you don't have to be blue to someone. You just put their alliance on the ACL, hit a button, and bam, all your jump bridges are open. And I noticed this with my AWACS and Horde ult because I went and stole a bunch of officer mods from a wreck one time. And I got there in 6 jumps. 2 jump bridges and a couple of gates. And I was there from Geminate into the fight. So it means that players that don't necessarily get involved in the day-to-day slug can show up for the major timer, like an iHub that really matters, and then shut it down. Shut that fight down. Boom, it's over.
That sounds like, wow, that's interesting. I need to recalculate.
Because there's no jump fatigue on jump bridges now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we use it to defend our space. It honestly feels like the defenders are at a huge advantage here. If you really care about your space, invest money and time, thanks, Aerith, to have 45 keep stars, it's going to be really hard to break that. You just not Fortress Delve. It's really now a fortress with some of these changes, unless something drastically changes. There's no way they'd have to outnumber Delve 3-4 to 1. But
it is interesting. It is interesting that we are now starting to see, like, a lot of times changes will be implemented and it'll be a while before those changes actually get tested out in practice, right? Like, there has been these skirmish level fights in the drone regions, like iHub's getting blown up here and there. But now, just within the last couple of months, we're starting to see real feedback from hot wars against defended targets that are organized, sort of state versus state conflict.
Well,
that's fascinating. Yeah.
We're just now starting to see that in the drones. So one of the key things with NCC moving to the drones, they moved to the drones a couple weeks ago, is they brought caps and they've put on Sinojammers. And when you have caps and Sinojammers in the drones and the other side doesn't have any caps at all, you just don't break timers, and ends up being like a stalemate there. Now the Spire's dead, but Malpus hasn't been touched because NC's able to project that. So yeah, that's a big deal. But here's another big deal. We talked about this last week, PIBC. Real quick, because we're running out of time here. We got to go. I got an update from some Chinese friends. I've been asking them, hey, keep updating us because PIBC is a big deal. That's 1,000 players. Move it over. That can be a lot of stuff in the coming year. From what I just got told recently is PIBC half will go to Amist. This was announced on Reddit because they tend to make their announcements publicly, their own guys first before they finish talking to everyone else. And then I heard another rumor, and again, this is just a rumor, but this is coming from very reliable friends that are Chinese, that a lot of the people in this PIBC like Goons because a lot of the old hand PIBC guys are in Goons, guys like Gary's Bar and stuff. And so they're going to come over and join us. They want to join their friends. They want to hang out with us. They like us. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic shift when it comes to the fighting against fraternity in the future. If they get their feet going and they have the characters and the skills and the ships, ooh, that could be interesting. If they're able to put out 100, 200-man fleets against fraternity, because these guys don't like fraternity. They hate them. From what I'm hearing, they don't like each other. It's kind of like, if you remember when we had Twizzlespark come on here and tell us about the Korean split, where one side's on one side, one side on the other. Same thing with China. Apparently fraternity, when they came over here to get away from PIBC. Now PIBC's following them and going, we're coming after you. So this is interesting. It'll be interesting to see in the future. I'm really excited.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
We're going to be out of time for this week. I want to thank our guests, Villy and Aerith, for joining us, and look to the future for some upcoming CSM hijinks, as well as more updates on Sov War Slogfests. And I guess we will soon be seeing what all this invasion stuff is about.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, for coming, and we will be back next week. Same time, same channel.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.